As a hunter, fisherman, or even an outdoorsman, have you ever thought that there's just too much regulation on fish and wildlife by the government? Haven't you ever wished that they let you do whatever you wanted to do in the great outdoors without any legal consequences? If you feel this way, I would like to encourage you to stop and think what would happen if this wish were to be granted. It was granted during past years. Up until 1900, there are no limits on what could be hunted and what couldn't. In the late 1800s, our wildlife started to become to be in great peril, and the wildlife that were once quite common in the United States were becoming quite scarce, and people were getting really worried, and something needed to be done. And today, I would like to persuade you to know why wildlife protection has always been, always will be essential to the survival of our wilderness. And first, we'll travel back in time to look at the consequences ungoverned hunting had on our wildlife, and then we'll travel ahead in time from 1900 to see what kind of impact legislation has had on the restoration of our wilderness. And I am credible to speak on this subject due to my 3 years of experience in the CC Rangeland program, my experience in my own extensive research, and my own love of hunting, fishing, and the great outdoors. First off, let's travel back in time to see what fish and wildlife were like before wildlife protection legislation. According to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service website, hunting was not regulated at all until the year of 1900. A few years prior to 1900, people began to question if animal populations could stay at a healthy level without any regulation on hunting. And according to the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, a 1900 observation concluded that there were only 500,000 white-tailed deer, 100,000 white-tailed wild turkeys, only 41,000 elk, and only 12,000 pronghorn antelope and migratory bird species were starting to be at dangerously low levels. And according to the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History, the lack of regulations on hunting and trapping was forcing species like the passenger pigeon to decline to the point of concern and extinction. And up until the 1800s, the passenger pigeon was such a common bird, and it was commonly seen migrating in massive numbers. And hunters began to kill these birds in mass numbers because they were a quick and easy way to get food, and this mass hunting caused the population of these birds to plummet, and in 1914, the last passenger pigeon died in captivity, making the species deemed extinct. And according to the American Bird Conservancy, greater prairie chickens nearly became extinct in the Great Plains due to a combination of habitat loss and hunting. And way back in the old days, greater prairie chickens were such a common species, you could pretty much see them everywhere. But in areas where they weren't found, they were considered a very high delicacy, and locals from around here would hunt these birds in massive numbers just to find a quick and easy way to get rich. And we have talked about what the consequences of lawless hunting have had on our wilderness up until the year of 1900. Now let's fast forward in time from the year of 1900 to see how wildlife protection legislation has helped to restore wildlife habitats and populations. According to the National Wildlife Federation, the Lacey Act of 1900, which was the first major act to be passed that had something to do with wildlife, made interstate or foreign commerce of poached wildlife illegal. And the 1913 Migratory Bird Act gave the federal government power to protect migratory birds. And the effects of the 1900 Lacey Act were seen almost right away. And this legislation was effective in crippling the illegal hunting of wildlife due to the fact that it made all commerce and sale of poached wildlife illegal. And the 1913 Migratory Bird Act helped the federal government get control of what was happening to the migratory bird species so no other birds would end up suffering the same fate as what happened to the passenger pigeon in the year of 1914. And the 1973 Endangered Species Act was signed into law, and this act gave individuals and organizations the power to petition to put one of their own animals on the species of on the species of endangered list. And according to the World Wildlife Federation, an astounding 99% of the species that have become endangered since the 1973 Endangered Species Act was passed have avoided extinction and have been restored to the point that they have been taken off the endangered species list. And if you guys were concerned about the white-tailed deer, elk, and wild turkey numbers, according to the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, the work done on wildlife conservation at both the federal and state levels has reaped massive rewards over the years in restoring these kinds of animal populations. And today, there are over 1 million elk, 1 million pronghorn antelope, 7 million wild turkeys, and over 32 million white-tailed deer in the wild. And there are also 44 million ducks flying around in the wild today. And we've come, that just shows you that how far we've come in these years of legislation. And in conclusion, today we went back in time to see the problems that ungoverned hunting had created, and then we started going forward in time to see how legislation on wildlife has helped to restore what had been lost in the past. And sometimes we may think that these restrictions get a little bit too far, but our lawless actions will have severe consequences that may last for many years. And I hope I was able to persuade you guys today on how important protecting our wildlife is. If we don't protect our wildlife, we will end up repeating the mistakes that we made in the past.